All over the world, different kinds of prisons are built to hold criminals of different categories, and each prison has its own set of rules and methods to keep these criminals in check. While some prisons manage to keep prisoners in check while providing them with tolerable living conditions, others are known to be hell on earth, with inmates being forced to face extreme torture and starvation. In this video, I will be revealing the dark side of prison life by doing a deep dive into prisons with the worst conditions. Black Dolphin Prison, Russia. The Black Dolphin Prison, formerly known as NKVD Prison No. 2, is one of the oldest prisons in Russia, located close to Russia's border with Kazakhstan. The prison's unique name was derived from a dolphin sculpture at its entrance. Legend has it, the dolphin was constructed by prisoners who would enjoy the company of nature while sitting on the grass at the prison's entrance. In the beginning, Black Dolphin was a jail reserved for people sentenced to life with hard labor, but after the Pugachev's rebellion in 1793, the prison was upgraded to also confine robbers. In the recent past, Black Dolphin Prison has morphed into a dreaded place used for the confinement of the country's worst criminals, including serial killers, terrorists, murderers, cannibals, and people who commit crimes against children. The security measures in this prison are top-notch, which makes it nearly impossible for inmates to escape. Seeing how it is a prison that holds the worst of the worst criminals, it's easy to see why extra miles have been put in place to ensure these criminals don't make their way back into society. Each inmate is isolated in a cell that is protected with a set of 3 steel doors. Each cell is equipped with a camera for 24-hour surveillance. This enables authorized officials to monitor events in the prison at all times. From the time they wake up in the morning until bedtime, the inmates are forced to remain standing and are not allowed to sit or rest on their bunks. Prison guards make rounds every 15 minutes to supervise the inmates and make sure they are following the rules. Inmates are locked in their cells for most part of the day. They're only allowed to exercise in a large cage for 90 minutes a day. During this exercise period, each cell is searched for illegal items and weapons. Inmates are only allowed to possess books, newspapers, and a radio. Anything other than that is considered illegal. There is minimal interaction between inmates at Black Dolphin, as there is no cafeteria in the prison. Prisoners are fed 4 times a day in their cells, and their meals are made up of soup and bread. Black Dolphin uses a unique method for moving inmates from one point to another within the facility. First, the inmates are blindfolded by prison guards to ensure that they do not have a full layout of the prison to enable planned escapes. Next, inmates are made to bend over at the waist with their hands handcuffed to the back. The guards hold onto the cuffs to guide the inmates to their destination. This method is done to deprive the inmates from getting a proper view of their surroundings, as well as prevent them from attacking the guards or other inmates. Another thing peculiar to Black Dolphin is the fact the inmates are forced to respond with "yes, sir" when interacting with prison guards. A notable prisoner of Black Dolphin is the German actress Carol Never, who died in jail in 1942, Kamiti Maximum Security Prison, Kenya. Prisons in Kenya are generally known for their inhumane living conditions. However, Kamiti Prison, located in Roysambu constituency, is regarded as the worst of them all. The prison was built to contain 1,400 prisoners, but it now holds well over 3,600 inmates, which is more than twice the population it was built for. The overcrowding in the prison has caused a serious deterioration in the health of many inmates. The spread of serious diseases and illnesses like gonorrhea, syphilis, tuberculosis, dysentery, and HIV is very common in Kamiti due to the unsanitary environment. Prisoners have to live in dilapidated buildings and jam-packed cells with a constant lack of basic sanitary requirements. The living condition is made worse by a constant lack of water, as there is no reliable source of water within the prison. About 200 prisoners are forced to haul buckets of water every day to at least keep themselves clean. Some sections of the prison are particularly popular for the kind of brutality that exists there. The G Block is a section filled with sexual predators who prey on the weak for their pleasure. It is possible that these predators are able to get away with their nefarious activities due to the overpopulation in the prison. The Kamiti Prison became famous for another reason in November 2008, when a search carried out uncovered a shocking fact about the prisoners. It was discovered that the inmates in Block A of the prison have been operating what could be called an illegal call center. It turned out that many of the inmates were in possession of cell phones, which were used for large-scale scamming schemes. The phones were of a particular brand made with a special voice-changing function that enabled these criminals to alter their voice when calling unsuspecting victims, feigning to be women or children in need. They would even go as far as faking accents to make their victims believe the lies they were being told. The inmates would then proceed to form a relationship with the victim and keep up with the charade until they successfully managed to extort money from the person. When they were not making calls, inmates would send dubious text messages to many Kenyans, waiting for an unlucky person who would take the bait. Other times, inmates would call people and claim to be calling from the local radio and somehow convince the person to give out their ATM information. There are rumors that these criminals were being aided by some warders who collected a share of the scam money the inmates made. Warders helping inmates in their illegal business goes to explain the prevalence of the scams in prison. Dozens of Kenyans have fallen victim to these elaborate scams, losing their life savings to hardened criminals who could not be stopped by prison bars. Kamiti Prison made the headlines once again in November 2009, when 8 prisoners died from a cholera outbreak. In 2021, news had it that captured, 3 inmates escaped from the prison, and 7 warders were later apprehended for aiding their escape. Terre Haute, USA. The United States Penitentiary, Terre Haute, is a high-security federal prison designated for male inmates. USP Terre Haute is built with multi-security levels, which consist of maximum security, medium security, and low security units. In July 1993, USP Terre Haute was assigned by the federal government to be the site where inmates on federal death sentences would be executed. A few years later, the prison was upgraded to contain the Special Confinement Unit, where the death row inmates are held before execution. In 1999, all male federal death row inmates were transferred from other federal and state prisons to USP Terre Haute. The federal government chose the prison as the Federal Death Row Center for Men because of its central location in the country. Although they have been condemned to death, inmates at USP Terre Haute are allowed to work at Unicor, a prison-based industry that produces towels and other accessories for the military. Each inmate could earn up to $6 to $12 daily. However, the conditions in which these men are confined have been the subject of debate worldwide. In 2008, the ACLU accused USP Terre Haute of having inadequate living conditions at the Special Confinement Unit. The ACLU claimed the death row inmates were not given adequate medical and mental health services. They also claimed that inmates had to deal with incessant noise, which is the cause of sleep deprivation. In Terre Haute, inmates are locked individually in small cells and spend most of their time alone, but they have the opportunity to speak to one another through the front of their cells. They are allowed to leave their cells 3 times a week for exercise and recreation, but these have to be done in a cage and not in the open. There is a high restriction of communication between inmates and the outside world. Inmates get only 7 visit days per month. Every mail they receive is screened, copied, and evaluated before they are handed over. Yet another communication restriction is that all inmates are mandated to speak English during every conversation. Since its inception, Terre Haute has witnessed the execution of 16 men, including Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh. Currently, the prison holds notable criminals like Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, aka the Boston bomber, whose death sentence was recently reinstated and is now awaiting execution. Despite the harsh conditions the inmates have to face, it is important to mention that USP Terre Haute was the first federal prison to consider providing psychological and psychiatric treatments for inmates. It is also one of the few prisons where prisoners are referred to by their names instead of numbers. In 2021, Terre Haute recorded the highest number of COVID-19 cases among other federal prisons. About 281 inmates tested positive for the virus, including death row inmates in isolation. About 14 out of 50 death row inmates were infected, which probably meant that they contacted the virus from the prison staff. San Quentin, USA. San Quentin Prison is the oldest prison in California and was built due to an increase in crime rate in San Francisco. From 1848 to 1852, the state witnessed an influx of fortune seekers, who in turn brought about an increase in crime. As more criminals were arrested, the city jail reached its limit and even became so overpopulated to the point that some prisoners were kept on a ship for a brief period before the government decided to build a prison. The San Quentin Prison was built to originally hold 250 prisoners, but that number was easily exceeded in a short period. The prison was originally handed over to private investors who won the contract to run the facility. These people were to maintain the prison, and in return, they were allowed to hire out the inmates to various companies. But as time passed, the prison was being mismanaged, and prisoners were subjected to harsh living conditions. Inmates were treated in the most inhumane ways and had to face brutal punishments like flogging and being sprayed with water from a high-pressure hose. At some point, the security in the prison was so bad that more than 80 prisoners escaped in 1 year, which led the government to forcefully reclaim management of the prison. San Quentin has been home to criminals of all sorts, including Sirhan Sirhan, the man who assassinated Robert F. Kennedy. It is the death row center for men sentenced to death in California, while women facing capital punishment are held at Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. The San Quentin death row is segmented into 3 sections, the first being the North segregation, reserved for inmates who are compliant and are not prone to causing trouble. Next is the East block, which basically holds the most number of death row inmates. And then there is the Adjustment Center. This section holds the worst of the worst criminals who have to be handled differently from the others. As of December 2015, the San Quentin death row has held over 700 male inmates, making it the largest death row facility in the United States. In 2001, the prison's death row was regarded as the largest in the Western Hemisphere, and in 2005, it was called the most populous execution antechamber in the United States. It is also home to the only gas chamber in California. 3 years after the state's governor put an end to capital punishment in the state, San Quentin's death row began the shutting down process in early 2022. All death row inmates are being relocated to normal cells. Diyarbakir, Turkey. The Diyarbakir prison in Turkey was established in 1980 by the Ministry of Justice. However, control of the prison was handed over to the military administration after the September 12, 1980 Turkish coup d'etat. Under the military administration, Diyarbakir became a martial law military prison, known for doling out some of the worst kinds of punishment. The Diyarbakir prison was built to contain 744 inmates, but as the years passed, the prison became overcrowded, and by 1996, it was holding 942 prisoners. Between 1981 and 1984, prisoners were made to endure horrible and inhumane torture in addition to overcrowding. This period is popularly known as the period of barbarity or the Hell of Diyarbakir. Prison guards were given permission to strip the inmates, beat them, and pull their hair without mercy. Sometimes the inmates would be blindfolded, stripped, and given water baths using high-pressure hoses. The prison used long-term solitary confinement as a method of torture, guards constantly insulting and dishing out death threats to inmates. The prison's captain, Captain Esat Oktay Yildirim, had a German Shepherd dog called Joe, and every inmate was obligated to salute the dog. They had no choice but to salute the animal, as it had been trained to bite the private parts of erring prisoners. The many forms of torture used include depriving inmates of sleep, as well as water and food deprivation for long periods. Sometimes the guards would flog the inmates on the soles of their feet or hang them up by their arms. Other times they were forced to keep standing for long periods or to do strenuous exercises in very unfriendly temperatures. Other torture techniques used include asphyxiation, sexual humiliation, crushing of limbs and genitals, and forcing naked prisoners to lie on top of each other. Electric shocks to the genitals, burning flesh with cigarettes, and pulling out nails and healthy teeth of inmates were also rampant. The guards had been given absolute control and did not hesitate to unleash hell on earth. Inmates were sometimes forced by guards to urinate on each other, and in other instances, the guards would go as far as raping or threatening to rape inmates even in the presence of their relatives. During the period of barbarity, it was normal for prison guards to use various terms like disco, welcome, theater, and bathroom as some sort of code names for different torture techniques. The term disco was used whenever an inmate was made to take a bath in the prison sewer. A former inmate who spent 11 years in the prison stated that every new prisoner was welcomed by Captain Esat at the gate. The captain would then instruct the guards to prepare the new prisoner a bath and then take him to the dormitory. What the prisoner wouldn't know is that he was about to get a welcoming taste of torture. The guards would start by beating him up before dragging him to a bathtub filled with human waste. They would then leave him there for the next few hours. Prisoner torture in Diyarbakir was so much that 34 inmates lost their lives due to torture during the period of barbarity. Diyarbakir is regarded as one of the most notorious prisons in the world, but in 2021, the Turkish president announced plans to turn it into a cultural center. Mendoza Prison, Argentina. Mendoza Prison in Argentina is plagued with overpopulation, as it is currently holding 3 times its original capacity. Overcrowding is a common problem with prisons in Argentina. However, Mendoza Prison is the worst of them all. Many prisoners in Argentina live in devastating conditions due to overpopulation. This has often led to prison riots and violent attacks between prisoners, which results in an increasing number of deaths. In Mendoza, 5 inmates are packed into a tiny cell that measures 43 square feet. Aside from being packed, there are not enough mattresses for the inmates, which means that they have to sleep on the cold floor. The state of Mendoza Prison was brought to light in 2005 when Amnesty International reported the condition of prisoners there. They noted that the prison sewage system was in a terrible condition, which forced the inmates to make use of plastic bags and bottles whenever they wanted to ease their bowel. The sewage system in shambles, it is safe to say that inmates at Mendoza are at risk of contracting numerous illnesses associated with contamination and poor hygiene. Their condition is worsened by the fact that the prison only calls for doctors and nurses after an inmate has died. The inmates do not have medical records and do not get medical care unless the case is deemed critical. There is a scarcity of medicine in the prison, and inmates who necessarily need to see a doctor have to go through extraordinary lengths, like cutting themselves to get medical attention. When the doctors finally come, they are not allowed into the prison wings. Amnesty International also reported that the prison guards would often beat the prisoners every time they searched the cells for illegal items. The beating would increase whenever the guards are trying to maintain discipline among inmates. There were also reports that 14 prisoners between the ages of 18 and 21 decided to protest the maltreatment they were facing by sewing up their lips for days. Sewing their lips to get the government's attention shows how much suffering the prisoners in Mendoza are going through. According to the Argentine Constitution, prisons are meant to be clean, safe, and healthy. In general, prisons are set up to focus on rehabilitation and not castigation. However, the case is different with prisoners at Mendoza, as the few people who make it out alive leave the prison in worse conditions than when they went in. Apart from the aforementioned problems, Mendoza also stands out due to the fact that many inmates there have not yet been tried and sentenced. Despite the fact they are yet to be pronounced guilty, these inmates have no choice but to suffer the inhumane conditions, hoping to one day make it out. In addition to their horrifying findings, Amnesty International is also concerned by the fact that since the year 2000, dozens of inmates have died due to violence in Argentine prisons, and only a few of these incidents have been investigated by the government. Guldani Prison, Georgia. Guldani Prison, located in Tbilisi, Georgia, attracted international attention due to a prisoner torture scandal that came to light in September 2012. The citizens of the country received a shocker when several videos that showed the prison guards and their superiors sexually molesting and torturing inmates were leaked. There had been a long-standing allegation that inmates at Guldani were being mistreated by the guards, but they remained allegations until the leaked videos confirmed them to be true. Thanks to the whistleblower, the country got to see firsthand the wickedness that took place place in the prison. The videos were released by 35-year-old Vladimir Bedukadze, who was also a prison officer. After blowing the whistle on the evil doings of his colleagues at Gildani, Vladimir fled to Belgium for his safety. At first, he was wanted in connection to the abuse case, but the prosecutors eventually let off the hook after considering his immense contribution in uncovering the grievous crimes that went on in the prison. The said videos contained scenes of the inmates being sexually abused or raped with broom handles and police batons. In the first video, a total of 10 guards were seen physically and verbally abusing the prisoners. In a second video, one inmate is instructed to take off his underwear and do as he is told. As he takes them off, the guard begins to insult and spit on him. After some time, the guard refers to the man he was abusing as a thief-in-law. The video ends with the man being forced to write something like a speech while the guard dictated it to him. In the third video, an Armenian prisoner who is bound tightly to a cell rod is seen raining curses on the prison guards. The video then shows another prisoner wearing a face mask. He is seen begging the guards not to make a video of him while they had their fun. The guards respond to his pleas by mocking and humiliating him. The prisoners at Gildani prison have gone through this kind of torture for so long that this particular inmate wore a face mask to hide his face from the camera. In the same video, another man's backside is put on display while the torturer repeatedly asks if he is a thief of the law, to which the man responded with, "I am a thief in law." In one last video shot at the youth detention center, inmates were physically abused and forced to call themselves thieves in law, the guards threatening them with rape if they did not do as they were told. These videos unfortunately made it to the public before getting to the government. Various groups immediately began different protests across the country. The government was forced to investigate the matter and bring an end to the ill treatment of prisoners at Gildani prison. The prison came to the spotlight again when the country's former president was imprisoned there. Various groups of protesters took to the streets, some in favor and others against the release of the former president. ADX Florence. ADX Florence, also known as Alcatraz for rookies, is one of the most secure prisons in the United States, and no one has ever been able to escape from there. The facility was designed to hold the worst kinds of criminals who are considered a danger to the country or to other prisoners. The extreme security measures used in this prison have been a cause for debate and lawsuits for some time now. However, these measures were put in place to ensure that the hardened criminals locked there never make it back into society to cause more harm. The prison holds criminals like the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski and Ramzi Youssef, who was behind the bombing of the World Trade Center. The inmates at ADX Florence are kept in complete isolation for 23 hours every day. They are not allowed to see or interact with anyone. They are also not allowed any form of human contact. Each prisoner is locked in single cells for at least their first 3 years there. For 1 hour every day, the inmates are allowed to exercise their bodies in a small indoor underground pit that resembles an empty swimming pool. The pit is so small that it would take only 10 steps to walk across it in a straight line and 31 steps to walk around it in a circle. Inmates have no idea of their location or surroundings as they are not let out into the open yard. Each prison cell is built with proper planning to ensure the inmates are secure in the cells. The cells contain a bed, a desk, and a stool that are mostly made out of poured concrete. Each cell also contains a toilet, sink, and a shower that is uniquely designed to ensure prisoner safety. The shower works with a timer, which means the water turns off after a short period. This is done so that the inmates do not have the opportunity to flood their cells. Each cell is 7 by 12 foot in size with a 4 by 4 window that allows inmates to see nothing more than the sky and roofs. Inmates can tell what time of the day it is by looking out their window, but they do not know what their environment looks like. This window placing has played a major role in the sense that no prisoner has been able to plan an escape because they do not know anything about their immediate surrounding. For extra security, the prison is rigged with cameras and motion detectors. Every nook and cranny of the facility is under 24-hour surveillance. There are a total of 1,400 doors in the prison, and every door is controlled from a control room that is never left unguarded. In the case of an escape attempt or chaos, all the doors are immediately locked by the push of a panic button in the control room, and the doors remain locked until the problem is settled. Many human rights activists have filed lawsuits against ADX Florence for the conditions in which the inmates are kept. Unlike other prisons where inmates face bad living conditions and physical torture, ADX Florence was carefully planned to mentally break the hardened criminals it holds. It has been said that keeping inmates in solitude for as long as 3 years has caused serious mental health damage to inmates. Camp 14, Kaeshan, North Korea. Kaeshan Internment Camp, or Camp 14, is a labor camp in North Korea, reserved for political prisoners and their families. The prison's official name is Kwanli-so, Penal Labor Colony number 14, and it sits on about 155 kilometers of land. The camp contains farms, mines, and factories where inmates are forced to work. About 15,000 people are imprisoned in Kaeshan internment camps. There are overcrowded barracks for males, females, and mature children. There are also administrative buildings and guard housings in the camp. People locked up in Camp 14 are those who have been classified as politically unreliable by the North Korean government. These people are seen as enemies of the state. They include government officials who performed poorly at their jobs, people who are suspected to be engaging in anti-government activities, and anyone who criticized the government. The sad thing about Camp 14 is that not only the supposed criminals are locked up here, the erring individuals criminals and their families, including children, are rounded up and locked up together. The camp operates on a policy known as the 3 generations of punishment, which means for every crime committed, the criminal's family members have to pay up to the 3rd generation. Children who are born in the camp are not regarded as free citizens, regardless of the fact that they were not in the world when their parents were locked up. These children are born straight into the hardships found in the camp and have no idea what living outside the camp is like. Prisoners are made to work in agriculture, coal mines, textile production, and in factories that produce food, paper, shoes, cement, ceramics, and rubber. Prisoners are given a choice to raise livestock because it gives them an opportunity to steal the food meant for the animals. When the prisoners are not slaving away at their jobs, they are constantly starved and tortured for minor offenses. Only one person has ever been able to escape from Camp 14 since it was built. Shin Dong-hyuk was 23 years old when he managed to escape the prison, but he had to climb over his friend's dead body and through an electrified fence to attain freedom. The freedom he worked hard to achieve was, however, a new concept to Shin, as he was born in the camp and had known nothing but starvation, hard labor, and constant beatings all his life. To make matters worse, he did not understand the meaning of family and love, as his environment had forced him to look upon his family as his competition for food. After he escaped, Shin managed to get into China, and from there he moved to South Korea before settling down in the Uji-Palmer, United States. Judging from the fact that he grew up in a setting as harsh as Camp 14, it is safe to say that it definitely took Shin Dong-hyuk time to get adjusted to the way of life outside the camp. He remains the only person born and raised in a North Korean prison camp to have escaped. Gitarama Prison, Rwanda. The Gitarama Prison in Rwanda is considered to be one of the deadliest and most crowded prisons in the world. The prison is home to about 7,000 inmates, when in fact it was built to contain only 600 inmates. The overcrowding was as a result of the 1994 Rwandan genocide, in which about 800,000 people were killed over a space of 100 days. Everyone considered a suspect for the horrific crimes was immediately arrested and locked up in the Gitarama prison. The rapid overpopulation of the prison led to the death of more than 1,000 inmates in 1995. The lack of proper living conditions, healthcare, and the use of unclean beds led to the rotting of the limbs of other inmates. Inmates spend many hours standing barefoot in whatever small spaces they can find, as the shortage of space does not allow them to sit or sleep comfortably. This continuous standing in unsanitary conditions results in many inmates' feet rotting and eventual amputation. The pronounced lack of proper medical care and frequency of sicknesses in this prison has led to a mortality rate of about 8 prisoners per day. The death rate in the prison is also affected by the unending violence between inmates. The hunger and starvation in the facility have turned many inmates into cannibals. They have resorted to killing the weak and eating their meat to sustain themselves. Gitarama has become a jungle of sorts, as the inmates now operate on an eat-or-be-eaten mindset. Over the years, various human rights organizations have raised many objections about the inhumane conditions in which inmates at Gitarama have to live. Unfortunately, these pleas have continued to fall upon deaf ears, as nothing has been done to alleviate the suffering of the inmates. Although the media is full of bad stories about the Gitarama prison, Rwanda has spoken up to deny all such reports, calling them fabrications by the media. One spokesperson claimed that the prison was overcrowded because of the number of suspects and limited infrastructure. However, the reports about extreme conditions and cannibalism are pure fabrications. In contradiction to this statement, the former Minister of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, Sir Jeremy Hamley, stated that the International Committee of the Red Cross believes that there have been over 2,000 deaths in 13 Rwandan prisons. They also believe that these deaths were caused by overcrowding and health problems, with Gitarama recording the highest number of deaths. On the topic of Rwandan prisons, another member of the Red Cross, Brigitte Troyon, said that the conditions in which inmates are kept are completely inhumane and they urgently need to be improved. If cannibalism has truly become a means of survival at Gitarama, then the mortality rates would continue to rise if nothing is done about the state of the prison. People should be afraid of getting into any kind of prison, but when it comes down to it, these prisons should be avoided at all costs. In many other prisons, inmates undergo rehabilitation and come out better citizens, but those who serve time in these prisons most likely come out worse than they went in. Check out this next video to learn more horrifying truths about life behind bars.